The year is 2000. Luis Figo was the king of Barcelona. He was the idol, the captain, and the very soul of the club. Catalonia! But in a single night, that love curdled into a level of vitriol rarely seen in sport. He went from the heartbeat of Camp Nou to the most hated man in Catalonia. The world watched in shock as he held up the white shirt of Real Madrid. But behind the scenes, the story was far more complex than a simple change of heart. This wasn't a standard negotiation, it was a heist. A high-stakes political play orchestrated by a man who wasn't even in power yet, Florentino Pérez.
Si yo soy presidente del Real Madrid, Luis Figo será jugador del Real Madrid.
Una azulgrana de pro fichara por el eterno rival, el Real Madrid.
La afición del Barça se pregunta, ¿culé o...?
El portugués con su nueva camiseta con el número 10, acompañado por la gran leyenda madridista Alfredo Di Stéfano.
Esta imagen, Luis Figo presentado como jugador del FC Barcelona, y esta otra, el portugués pisando el césped del Bernabéu como jugador del Real Madrid. Han pasado 5 años.
But to understand how the world's best player was manipulated into the ultimate betrayal and how things descended into such chaos, we have to go back to where it all began. 1995. A talented 22-year-old kid was finally ready to leave his home country of Portugal and move abroad for the first time ever to further his career. It was Barcelona who signed him for £2.5 million. But before then, he had signed a contract with 2 Italian rivals, Juventus and Parma, and for that reason, he was banned from playing in Italy. This wasn't just a youthful mistake, it was the blueprint. Before he had even stepped foot in Spain, Figo had already established a reputation for making messy, conflicting contractual decisions that prioritized the highest bidder over club loyalty. That would become a theme that would define his entire playing career. But at the time, he was one of the best things Barcelona could have asked for. He was dazzling, he was entertaining, he was a leader, and he had the entire streets of Barcelona. But one day, everything changed, which made those streets absolutely turn on him.
Una azulgrana de pro fichara por el eterno rival, el Real Madrid.
Barcelona fans felt totally betrayed, and they made their feelings known everywhere, on the streets of Barcelona and at the Camp Nou. Figo and his family's lives were threatened because of this move.
Were you at any point scared of your safety,
Well, realistic, no, but of course in that moment, me and my family, we suffer a lot of threats, no? But what you're gonna do? It's like you have to live with that.
But what those angry fans didn't know was that Figo himself had been played by a footballing mastermind.
In the year of 2000, Florentino Pérez was one of the candidates for becoming Real Madrid's president, and his campaign was mainly about making the club the place full of stars and being able to buy every single player on the market.
In 1995, Florentino Pérez was a 48-year-old businessman who had dreams of doing great things in football. That year, he ran for the post of president of Real Madrid Football Club, but he lost. 5 years later, he ran again. This time, it was tougher. He was up against Lorenzo Sanz, the incumbent president who had just led the club to 2 Champions League titles in 3 years. But Pérez was more determined not to lose this time. So he decided to do something crazy in order to win votes. He made the fans the craziest promise.
Si yo soy presidente del Real Madrid, Luis Figo será jugador del Real Madrid.
Back then, moving directly between Barcelona and Real Madrid wasn't just controversial. It was unforgivable. The problem was that Luis Figo was playing for the rivals, and no player of his status would dare think of making the move from Catalonia to Madrid. It was unthinkable, impossible. But Florentino Pérez was one man who had the knack for making the impossible possible. He reached out to Paulo Futre, a Portuguese legend and a man Figo looked up to. Pérez gave Paulo the task to get the deal done, and he went straight to work. Paulo managed to get Pérez to promise a €6 million agency fee to Figo's agent, Jose Vega, and that was all the motivation that he needed. Immediately, Vega packed his bags and flew to the Netherlands, where Figo was representing Portugal at Euro 2000.
During the Euro 2000 with my national team, and suddenly I got a call from my agent. He said, no, look, is a candidate of the elections in Madrid that want to pay your clause and that you go to Madrid. You say, what? What is this? And that time my clause was 60 million euros, and this is a candidate. So what you want me to do? So I have contract. This is a candidate. You don't know either if he want to win the elections or not. So okay, I told him, okay, you listening what you have to say to you, and that's it.
Euro 2000 is in full swing at the moment. Kevin King's England are imploding to Luis Figo's Portugal. So Figo is at this tournament. And you know how players always say, oh yeah, I won't let transfer speculation get in the way of a major tournament. It's all nonsense, as we all know, because Figo flies over to the Netherlands, where Euro 2000 is taking place, and is in Figo's hotel room. And Figo's explaining this after the event, going, so my agent's turning up here, I'm in the middle of a tournament, and he's saying, there's this person I've never heard of who wants me to sign for Real Madrid, and he's going to sort of quadruple your salary. But he's like, what the hell are you talking about? I mean, I've got a tournament to worry about. Like, why would I be joining Real Madrid? I've never heard of this bloke. Why not? Oh, and by the way, he wants you to say, I'll join Real Madrid if I win the election, because that's going to go down well in Barcelona, isn't it? So Figo's just like, you're mad, get out of my room, I don't want to talk to you. I mean, in the most polite way that a player can say to an agent, but he is completely perplexed at this stage, going, what are you talking about? But what he doesn't realise is, not only is that there a €6 million commission involved in this, but something really important has already happened. And a phrase that is going to bedevil football coverage for the next 25 years. A pre-contract has been signed.
When Figo finally realised that it wasn't a joke, he told his agent to continue the conversation with Pérez and also take it to Barcelona. He hoped that he would be able to use that to get a better contract from Barcelona. Before that day, he had never heard of the name Florentino Pérez and had no idea who he was. But here he was, offering him a truckload of cash to pretty much do nothing. He thought that there was absolutely no way Pérez would win the elections and become Real Madrid president, so it felt like there was no risk in signing the pre-contract agreement. It felt like free money, and there was just no way that he was going to pass on that. But soon, reality started to hit.
3 days before the elections, the reality of the situation finally hit Luis. He began to realize exactly what he had gotten himself into. Then came the death threats. It was terrifying. When he originally said yes to the deal, he hadn't discussed it with his wife. It was a rash, impulsive decision. But as the threats against his daughters began to pile up, he started to have second thoughts. He told his agent, Jose Vega, I am never going to Madrid. Not ever. But there was a problem. Vega, acting as a licensed agent, had already signed the contract on Figo's behalf. And that contract contained a clause that was almost impossible to believe. If Figo fails to arrive in Madrid, the signee is personally obligated to pay 35 million euros. Figo had no intention of traveling to Madrid, but the requirement was firm.
But Pérez wasn't leaving it to chance. To ensure Figo couldn't back out, he reportedly leaked the news of the secret deal to the press himself. By making the impossible public, he backed Figo into a corner and swung the election momentum entirely in his favour. As elections drew closer, it started to look like Pérez might actually win. So Figo panicked and went to the new Barcelona president, Joan Gaspart, who himself had just won their own elections.
The same night I won the election, he called me from Lisbon and said, "Joan, I have 2 tickets. One is Lisbon-Barcelona, the other is Lisbon-Madrid. It depends on you which one I take. I want a 500 million peseta guarantee in case I break my agent's agreement."
Apparently, the contract Figo's agent had signed with Pérez included a huge penalty of 30 million euros if Figo refused to stick to his own part of the deal.
Florentino Pérez that if I didn't go to the club, he had to pay like a 1-year membership for him. I never saw this contract, you know. I never saw this contract in my life, and but he was playing with that, you know.
Figo wanted Barcelona to help him pay the fine, but Gaspart said he could not do it. It would be him basically paying a record fee to the club's biggest rivals just to keep their own player. He said no way.
I couldn't pay a fine to Real Madrid. That money would pay for their members' season tickets. So I told him, go to Madrid.
Figo was scared. He didn't want to leave Barcelona, especially not to join deathly rivals Real Madrid. He knew exactly what the consequences would be. But the day of Real Madrid elections came, and Pérez won.
When he won 16,469 votes to the 13,302 votes of Lorenzo Sanz.
This left Figo with 2 options: pay 30 million euros to Pérez or join Real Madrid. He didn't have that kind of money, neither did his agent. So he made the move.
When election results came in and it was clear that Florentino Pérez had won, Veiga was in total shock. He was literally sitting there, crying his eyes out. The election was on Sunday. By Tuesday, Figo was expected in Madrid, but he was hiding out in Sardinia, refusing to go. At 5 in the morning, Veiga and I boarded a private plane from Lisbon to Sardinia to find him. It was a sight I'll never forget. Figo and his wife were absolutely devastated. A friend of his later asked him, "How am I supposed to explain to my son, a Barca fan, that you're going to Madrid?" Figo simply told him, "Tell him I'm heading to Madrid to keep my agent out of prison." He used the agent as his excuse, but the truth was simpler. He had absolutely no way out. He was trapped by a masterstroke of a contract. If Florentino had lost, Figo would have stayed at Barca, but Florentino won. The world found out, and the impossible transfer became the story of the century.
This move created chaos in Catalonia. There were riots on the streets of Barcelona. For Barcelona fans, this was ultimate betrayal. He wasn't just anybody, he was their best player, their captain. He was Luis Figo, but he left to join the enemy. When he returned to the Camp Nou as a Real Madrid player, he needed security.
What I don't really like, you know, in that moment I didn't like was things that of course you couldn't control. Be a little bit concerned about what could happen. But all this was provoked by the press in Barcelona. I always say, because the campaign and the news and what was done, not only for my person, but directed to my wife and kid.
The fans went berserk.
My kid was 1 year old. When I came back, a lot of banners with the face of my daughter.
They called him Judas, scum, a traitor, all sorts of names. It was the most hostile crowd ever. Nearly 100,000 people screaming and hurling things at one man. Among the coins, lighters and whiskey bottles, one image would forever define the rivalry: a suckling pig's head tossed onto the pitch. It was the ultimate symbol of Barcelona's disgust. A Judas who had just sold his soul for Madrid's gold.
I was at the Nou Camp the day that Figo came back to play there for the first time for Real Madrid, who we know he defected to. Pig's head on the pitch. It was extraordinary. Steve McManaman said afterwards that he'd refused to sit next to him on the team bus, where he normally did. He'd refused to sit next to Figo on the team bus on the way into stadium because of what he knew was going to be coming towards the windows. I think the president of Madrid told him that he wasn't to take corners for his own safety because that was too close to the side of the pitch. You know, normally when you go to a football game and someone gets booed and it lasts for about 5 minutes and then the game gets going and everybody gets bored, they didn't get bored that day. Every time he touched the ball, the decibel level at the Nou Camp, every time Figo touched the ball was off the scale, and it absolutely affected him.
They were angry. They didn't care about the details of the transfer. They didn't care to know if Figo's hands were tied. All they knew was that their captain had betrayed them, and they now hated him for it. He was once their hero, but now he was a villain. But in truth, the real villain was in the stands, watching, smiling and enjoying every single moment of his pièce de résistance. When he first thought up the idea, everyone called him stupid. But with the most masterful plan, Florentino Pérez managed to bring the unthinkable to life. Even his rivals bowed to him and his genius.
Florentino, shortly after Figo's official presentation, he said, John, I would like us to meet face to face on World Road. I told him he should come to Barcelona, but he insisted, no, I'd prefer it if you came to Madrid. So I went to Madrid to see him, and we met in his office. I walked in and I let him have it. I gave him a piece of my mind, but deep down I told him, I have to congratulate you because you had a level of skill that I just didn't see coming. I never would have imagined a masterstroke like this. It was a powerful deal, perhaps wrong, perhaps immoral, call it whatever you want, but you did exactly what had to be done to win. In fact, I believe this single move is what won you the presidency. You had lost once before, but this was your second chance and you took it. Figo will bring you a lot of success, even if the way you got him wasn't right. Yeah, he offered me his apologies, and then we went to lunch with his wife.
And that right there was the beginning of a new era for Florentino Pérez and for Real Madrid, the Galacticos era. In the following years, Pérez would lure more superstars to the Bernabeu. Zinedine Zidane in 2001, R9 in 2002, David Beckham in 2003, Michael Owen in 2004, all the way to Cristiano Ronaldo in 2009, and Kylian Mbappe in 2024. And in the end, for all the outrage, the hatred and the scars it left behind, the transfer of Luis Figo would become more than just a controversial move. It became the beginning of an empire. That was the move that facilitated Florentino Pérez's ascension to the throne, started his empire, and turned him into something of a god at Real Madrid. Even now, decades later, Florentino Pérez is spoken of as a visionary, a genius operating several moves ahead of everyone. And the Luis Figo transfer of 2000 remains his defining creation. His Mona Lisa, his Ninth Symphony, his Sistine Chapel, his Hamlet. A masterpiece born from absolute chaos, and perhaps the greatest power play football has ever seen. And if you think football destroys loyalty, wait until you see what it did to Adriano. The most feared striker in the world had everything: power, fame, money, and then one day he walked away from all of it. It is one of the saddest stories this sport has ever produced. So click on the screen to watch his incredible story.